Hello, everybody, and welcome to our Almond Hour today on unpacking the next round of stimulus for small businesses and helping to digest the new information that has been made available. Please post your questions in the Q&A only. A recording of this webinar will be made available to you shortly thereafter, and we will also be emailing a copy of the slides to you to make it easier for you so you do not have to take notes. Briefly about myself, I'm the founder and CEO of Multifunding LLC. Since 2010, we have been helping business owners and entrepreneurs get the best possible loans to reach their greatest growth aspirations. I write a regular column on Inc., featured in the press. I've advised the White House, the Federal Reserve, and Treasury departments on business credit matters, and I am an author of The Growth Dilemma. My attorneys ask that we read some disclaimers before we begin. We are not acting as agents, packages, or brokers and will not be able to help you get a loan placed with a specific lender or prepare or assemble applications or documents for use in the applications. We are in an unprecedented time in history, and the information available to us continues to change. The information provided is based upon our best judgment about what we know at this time and a decade of experience with SBA lending. However, key questions remain about how to implement these government programs. Multifunding LLC does not accept any liability as it relates to the timeliness or content of the information we are sharing today or may share in the future, and we are under no legal duty to update any such information or recommendations. We encourage you to check in with your attorneys, CPAs, and financial advisors for additional information. Just to reiterate, there will be plenty of time for Q&A in the end. Please post your questions in the Q&A section, and the moderators will help us go through them. Our commitment to you: we won't engage in speculation. We won't only share the facts. A lot of questions we just don't know the answer about for sure. As soon as this webinar is done, we will post it so you can share it with yourself and your friends. There will be many questions that we just don't know the answers to as we await for guidance. I promise you that if we don't know yet, we will tell you that. As new guidance comes out, which it will, we will provide updated webinars, and when there is new content, we will let you know that there's something new coming to respect your time. Today, we are going to talk about second draw PPP loans, changes in the PPP forgiveness process, opportunities within the new act within the SBA program, and updates on the grants and EIDL loans. We are going to go through a lot of information, and we'll do our best to help you. There's a lot of information in the act that we're simply not covering: farmers and ranchers, farm credit system institutions, eligibility of news organizations, eligibility of 501c6 and destination or marketing organizations, details about grants or shuttered venues, and expansion of participation in the 8A program. Now let's dig in where so many people are interested: the PPP second draw loans. These are open for business today at the SBA, but lenders are just getting up to speed, and there's going to take some time, and different lenders will get up to speed faster. My best advice to you is, if you applied for a PPP the last time and you had a decent experience with your lender, probably the best thing to do, the easiest thing to do, will go back to your lender the second time. If you have not gotten a PPP yet, you can still apply for a first round PPP, and you do not have to meet the revenue reduction requirements if you're getting a PPP for the first time that we're going to lay out today. The general attributes of the PPP loans remain the same. The guarantee percent is 100%. No collateral will be required. No personal guarantees will be required. The interest rates will be 1%, and the maturity of the loans for whatever is not forgiven will be 5 years. Any business concern is eligible: nonprofit, housing cooperative, veterans organization, tribal business concern, eligible self-employed individual, sole proprietor, independent contractor, or small agricultural cooperative. To get a second round PPP loan, You must have received a first round PPP and either use the funds for allowable purposes or state that you will use them before you get the second round. And as of today, you must be funded before March 31st, 2021, or when the money runs out. Your business must not be permanently shut. If you have permanently shut your business, you cannot get a second round PPP. And except for a few rare instances, you must employ 300 people or less. You must show that your gross receipts in one quarter of 2020 are down at least 25% compared to the same quarter in 2019. Or a reduction of annual receipts, if you take the entirety of 2020 and compared to 2019, could also be down at least 25%. But you must, in that case, demonstrate your tax returns to prove it. What are gross receipts? There have been a lot of questions about this. These include all revenues in whatever form, including received or accrued, from sales, products or services, interest, dividends, rents, royalties, fees, or commissions, reduced by returns and allowances. If you have an affiliated company, the gross receipts of the affiliated company count in the overall company. But if you received a forgivable PPP loan, this amount does not count. There are some exceptions that I won't go through in detail, but you can look at the slides. If you were not in business in Q1 or 2 of 2019, Q1, 2, 3 of 2019, or anytime during 2019, but were in operation before February 15th, 2020, there are different ways that you determine your eligibility. It is confusing to people how you determine gross receipts. What I encourage you to do, if you do not know, check in with your accountant to determine if you use accrual or cash accounting. If cash, the amount of your deduction can be determined either by your back statements or your accounting reporting, such as your QuickBooks. If it's accrual, you will require accounting. If you're not sure, I encourage you to check in with your accountant. There have been a lot of questions at this point, and I want to make clear. Quarters are based on calendar quarters. You cannot pick a rolling 3 months. And keep in mind that even if you meet the criteria of the 25% reduction, you must still be willing to certify that you require the money to support the ongoing operations of your business. And assuming you make that attestation, remember that in all likelihood, all loan recipients will be public information again this time as they were last time, and you do incur audit risk about that attestation. How much PPP money can you get in the second round? You need to take the lesser of 2.5 of your average monthly payroll costs of either calendar year 2019 or calendar year 2020, or with a maximum amount of $2 million. If you are in the food or hospitality business, which is NAICS code 72, you can get 3.5 months, the average monthly payroll cost. Some people have been asking us, what is a NAICS code? This is an industry classification code that can be found on your tax return. What documentation will you need for your lender? If your PPP application is for $150,000 or less, you don't need to submit any documentation application to get your PPP round to prove your revenue reduction, but you will when you apply for forgiveness. If your amount is greater than $150,000, you will have to provide proof to your lender of your reduction in revenue. What entities are not eligible for PPP round 2.0? Publicly traded companies, entities primarily engaged in political or lobbying activities, any businesses that would otherwise be ineligible for SBA loans except for nonprofits and religious organizations. And there are specific new rules around entities involved with the People's Republic of China. Also, if you were not in operation on February 15th, 2020, you're not eligible. And there's an exclusion of entities receiving shuttered venue operator grants that we will explain later. There are in the Act certain bankruptcy provisions, and certain small business debtors are eligible for PPP with court approval. Now let's talk about the second section of our presentation, the changes to the PPP forgiveness process. Everything is largely the same, with the same 60% used for payroll and 40% for other expenses, but there are some additional expenses that can be covered. We'll describe in a minute. If you already applied for forgiveness and got it, and your loan amount was, and you were not forgiven for the full 100%, unfortunately, you cannot retroactively apply for more forgiveness or try to adjust your forgiveness application. But some of the expenses that you otherwise ordinarily would have asked for forgiveness, you can add them now. The additional expenses specifically are related to the operations of your business, property damage costs, supplier costs, and worker protection expenditures. General running of your business, processing of payments, tracking of payroll expenses, HR management, sales and billing functions, accounting or tracking of supplies, inventory records and expenses. These expenses are now considered eligible for forgiveness. If your business incurred property damage during the riots of 2020 or vandalism or looting, you can now submit these expenses for forgiveness. Supplier costs are made to supply goods, etc., essential to operation of your business at the time the expenditure was made. You can now add these to your forgiveness request. If you paid money for worker protection expenditures to protect your employees, you can now submit these receipts for forgiveness. Some things are, as an example, if you added a drive-through window facility as a restaurant, you'd add an on or off-site health screening capabilities, particular filtering faces within your air conditioning units, etc., general protective equipment. These can be included for forgiveness. And now also specific group insurance payments as payroll costs can be included in your payroll costs. The covered period for forgiveness will remain at 8 or 24 weeks at your flexibility. For those applying for forgiveness now, either for PPP round 1 or round 2, there will be a simplified forgiveness application for loans under $150,000. You will submit to the lender a certification providing a description of the number of employees the recipient was able to retain because of the covered loan, the estimated amount of the covered loan spent on payroll costs, and the total loan value. You will attest that you accurately provided the certification, you have compiled with the requirements of the PPP loan, and that you will retain the relevant records for 4 years should you ever be audited. And now, which is a big benefit to many, that PPP forgiveness expenditures are considered non-taxable income. Now let's take a few minutes for the third section of our presentation and talk about the changes to the SBA program. Just keep in mind, for everyone's knowledge, you can use a general SBA loan to buy out a partner or acquire a business, for expansion or growth capital, to refinance debt, to buy, refinance, or construct an owner-occupied building, or to start a business or buy a franchise. Some of the biggest myths about SBA loans are that the SBA lends money. And this is just for regular SBA lending now. This is not for PPP or EIDL. And this is not the case. The SBA is a government guarantee program that encourages banks and some non-bank lenders to make riskier loans than they otherwise would. The other myth out there is that the SBA is just for mom and pop shops. And that is also not the case. You can get up to $5 million for partner buyouts, working capital and acquisitions, and up to $12.8 million for real estate or equipment loans, including 504s. And the third myth is that I'm not qualified for an SBA loan according to my bank. And this is also not the case. There are over 2,200 banks and non-bank lenders who work with the SBA. So what are the specific changes to the SBA program in this new act? Keep in mind that time is of the essence to take advantage of these because they expire on September 30th or whenever money runs out, whichever is the sooner. If you apply for and receive an SBA loan for any of the ways you can use it for, say you get a loan for $350,000, which is you can see in the left-hand column. On the far right-hand column, you could see between the fees and 6 months of payment relief, you will save over $31,000. If you apply for and receive a $5 million SBA loan, which is the example at the bottom, you could receive and save over $194,000 of fees and 6 months of payments. For the SBA 504 loans, which is for real estate or equipment, there are also savings. If you already have an SBA loan and in the last round you receive 6 months of payment relief, you will get an additional 3 months of relief this time, but this benefit is now capped at $9,000 a month, and these payment reliefs, which should happen directly through your lender, will start effective February 1st. If you are in certain industries that are hard hit, will receive up to an additional 5 months of benefits. And if you now get a new SBA loan between now and September 30th as part of the savings, you will get 6 months of payment relief capped at $9,000 a month, which is a real savings. These benefits retroactively and today are tax-free events. You do not have to pay tax on the amount that you're saving. In addition, in the new act, SBA Express loans, which are essentially a line of credit, through September 30th still remain at the $1 million threshold, and they will return to $500K after September 30th. All SBA fees to borrowers are waived during this time, and there are attractive low interest refinancing under the 504 loan programs. Now let's dig into the fourth part of our presentation before we take your questions. This is tied to the grants and EIDL loans. There are specific grants for shuttered venue operators. These are live venue operatives, promoters of theatrical producers, independent movie producer, theater operators, museum operators, or talent representatives. I'm not going to go in and dig in and explain how all these work, but you have to demonstrate a 25% drop in revenue in order to receive one of these grants. EIDL loans are extended through December 31st, 2021, as they relate to COVID-19. It is not clear, but we believe that the EIDL is still capped at $150,000 per business. This is subject to further guidance. If you received less than $150,000 last time and you want to apply for more, there's a process with someone at the SBA to email and different forms that have to be filled out, and we are sharing that. We will share that with you in the slides that we share out. Be careful that you cannot use PPP money and EIDL money for the same expenses. There's also a repeal of the EID advanced deduction. If you receive one of those initial EIDL grants up to $10,000, that number will no longer be taken from your PPP forgiveness amount. And if you already applied for PPP forgiveness and got it, your bank should reimburse you that $10,000 or up to $10,000 in the next few weeks. The target EIDL advances for $10,000 are extended, primarily intended to serve underserved communities. And now the SBA has 21 days instead of 3 days to disperse these funds. We are going to put in the chat now and encourage you to fill it out, a Google form, which hopefully if you write it down, you'll learn it. It gives you the chance to just jot down the 3 takeaways from this presentation, as well as if you want any additional follow-up information, you can share with it. Also, on Wednesday of this week, if anyone is specifically interested in learning more and digging more into the traditional SBA loan program, how it works and how you could take advantage of the benefits, we will be doing another Aminar at noon on Wednesday, and we will share information about that. We also have different places where you can connect with us and ask us lots of questions about all of this information. And now we welcome you to share your questions. I'm going to ask again that you please put them in the Q&A, and we will work through them as methodically as we can. Thank you, Hannah.
Thank you, Ami. Can individuals apply for PPP2 if they do not have their 2019 1040 finished up yet?
That should not be a problem.
If a business did not get the first round of PPP, can a business ask for a loan under the first round rules?
It's a hybrid answer. So there are some new rules, but you don't have to meet the 25% revenue reduction if you did not get one in the first time.
Can you apply for both SOS and PPP and only accept one of them, or if you can't file both?
I'm sorry, I don't know what SOS is.
300 employees, is this an individual company, like applicant, with its subsidiaries, or group level, including their subsidiaries and parent companies? Also, this includes only US-based employees or global workforce.
Yeah, I don't know how to answer the question exactly, except that the same affiliation rules apply that applied last time, and the same US or global employee rules apply that applied last time, except now instead of the cutoff being 500, it is typically 300.
Gross receipts. Is this on cash basis or accrual? And what are the documentation evidence that we're required to submit to show the 25% reduction in revenue?
So the gross receipts are based on how you filed your tax return. That is the first thing to check to determine. Once you've determined that, if your PPP request is for $150,000 or less, you don't have to submit anything in application. You have to submit something at forgiveness application. If it's 150 or more, you're going to have to either present some internally prepared financial reports or bank statements to back it up. And this is one of the areas that is the vaguest and is going to differ lender by lender as they await more guidance about how to do this.
They say that today's PPP application are just through community banks. When do you think regular banks will come online?
Um, that's not really that's not really quite clear. So the SBA portal right now is only open for applications from the community bank services, but many banks are already starting to take them. That doesn't mean that they won't submit it to the SBA on Wednesday. Every bank is working at their own rhythm and their own speed, and we'd encourage you to check in with your bank.
There's conflicting information as to whether a recently filed bankruptcy prohibits a company from receiving a second round of PPP when the company received and spent the first round under the rules but still had to file for bankruptcy.
It is my understanding that in many cases, although I don't know specifically which you can and you can't, you're absolutely eligible for the second round of PPP as long as you get approval from the court to do it.
I have 7 months of financial reserves. Do I qualify as my income has dropped more than 25% and run into red each month?
Well, you likely qualify by the one standard of your revenue reduction, your income reduction, but then it's up to you to interpret the attestation that you require the money to support ongoing operations of your business. And that's a judgment call that you'll have to make for yourself.
We have a question about refinancing an SBA loan, and we have an Aminar on that on Wednesday. How do you file for retro 2020 ERTC now that PPP receipts are eligible recipients?
I believe that's employee retention tax credit. That's a tax issue, and that's something that I'd encourage you to check in with your CPA about.
Calculation of gross receipts with respect to revenue reduction. Is this on quarterly or annually? And is there a difference in method calculation of gross receipts, which is active for all quarters of 2019 to a company which is partially active in 2019?
So some of that question that I don't entirely understand, but I'm going to repeat that this area of, I think this is going to be the most confusing area for so many businesses. So I'm going to repeat the basic fundamentals because they're important. The basic fundamentals is you have to determine on your tax returns if you file on report on a cash or an accrual basis. However you do that is the same way that you need to do your PPP application. And if you're not sure about that, you should check with your CPA. Then it should be fairly simple. Hopefully your bookkeeping is up to date and you can check either your payroll, you can check your reports and determine if you meet the requirements. Or if it's on a cash basis, you can certainly go by your bank statements.
Are partners, owners in LLC allowed to include compensation up to 100K annually in the annual compensation calculation?
That should be based on whatever happened when you did the first time, you should be able to do the second time.
Can you shed some light on the nuances for seasonal businesses and how does it work for the seasonal business?
Yeah, I'm not 100% sure of this, but I don't think seasonal businesses is as big a deal this time as it is last time, because last time it was based on your payroll expenses for the last 2.5 of the last 3 or 4 months. Now it's based on your average payroll expenses for the year 2020 versus 2019. So I don't think seasonal businesses is as big an issue this time as it is last time, but I might be missing something.
You have said, I believe, that people who already applied for forgiveness for PPP1 and did not get 100% forgiven are still eligible for second round funding. Can you please elaborate? And if you did not get 100% forgiven, how are they eligible if the rules say you have to spend all of first round funds to be eligible for second round?
Okay, so that's kind of, there's a lot in that question. So let me try break it down. You must have completed you must have used or plan to use your full PPP loan first round completely by the time the second round is dispersed to you in order to be eligible for the program. If you applied for forgiveness and say you got 75% forgiveness the first time, and you're scratching your head saying, oh, wow, there are additional expenses that I now could have added to my forgiveness application and gotten more money, you're out of luck.
Do I need to utilize the same bank for the second round as the first round? It has been specified that they want borrowers to utilize small community banks, and is there a list of them available?
You're not required to use the first bank this time as you did the last time. However, I would encourage you, if you had a decent experience with your bank the first time, it's probably, and they're still doing the program, it's probably easier to go ahead and do it. There will be on SBA.gov, I'm sure, a list of participating institutions. I don't know if it's up there yet, but if it's not, it should be up there soon.
What are the financial requirements for the first draw loans?
There are a lot less financial requirements. You do not have to prove the 25% reduction in revenue like you do for the second draw loans. This is assuming that you didn't get one the first time, but you still have to certify and make the attestation that you need the money to support, you require the money to support the ongoing operations of your business.
I am a corporation without employees. My daughter and I work for our business. I would like to know how to apply for the first PPP and the second. Our business is down over 35%.
There's no question in my mind that you absolutely can apply for the first round PPP loan, and you can do that at your bank or a fintech lender or wherever you choose to. I don't believe there's now a system to double down and apply for the first and the second one at the same time. if you apply for the first one, get it, then use all the money for allowable expenses, and the second program is still open by March 31st, then I think you could apply for a second one then, but you can't apply for both at the same time.
For round two, should we apply under each separate companies instead, or any advantage versus under one company, like the business entity?
Should do it however you did it the last time. If that worked for you the last time, it should work for you now. None of those rules have changed.
Employee 300 employees currently or in 2019, as is that defined as full-time employees?
I don't know the answer 100%. We'll try to look that up and get it posted in the community.
If you get an SBA, if you get a PPP for a sole owner LLC, where the owner draws is what they earn, and all other instructors are 1099, what amounts can be classified as payroll?
It would really be only the owner draws up to the $100,000. Any 1099s do not count, which is the same as last time.
What does it mean that you require the money to support the ongoing of your business? I don't know how I will spend it in 2021.
Different people will interpret it differently, but what you're saying is you need it, you're really worried you will shut the business and not be able to keep going in business without this money.
Did you say that PPP-1 funds had to be deducted from gross receipts of PPP-2, or is that only if PPP-1 was forgiven?
They're not, the PPP funds are not included in gross receipts, and that should benefit you, not hurt you, irrespective of whether it's been forgiven, is my understanding.
Lesser of payroll costs in 2019 or 2020. So for those shuttered in 2020, they have to account for the reduced payroll?
That's my understanding of it.
Where do we find a lender who is able to submit a second round of PPP during the early window period beginning Wednesday?
And you can look around, but I would, and there'll be lots of places, but if you went and did it the first time, I would encourage, and you had a decent experience with that lender the first time, I would encourage you to go back there. It'll be easier for you because you'll be dealing with both loans and both forgiveness applications through the same portal.
What is the definition of average monthly payroll cost? Does it include the cash costs of payroll taxes?
Yeah. However, it was calculated the last time, and it's the employer versus employee. There's some specifications there, but however you calculated the payroll cost this time will be the same with the $100,000 cap per person. There'll be some additional healthcare costs, which I think still need to be further clarified, can now be added to your payroll cost.
You mentioned supplier costs as expenditures. If you're a restaurant or caterer, does that include food purchases?
That is my understanding, to support the ongoing operations of your business.
Is cost of goods sold considered to be a supplier cost?
Again, I think there's going to be some further guidance specifically about what is or isn't a supplier cost. I think we're going to have to wait for further guidance about that. And I know it's frustrating, it might be frustrating to everyone out there when I'm not giving you clear answers, but that's my commitment to you. If I'm not 100% sure, I'm going to tell you that.
In my state, they are asking for a name of your business filed with the state. I'm self-employed, so I don't have a filing with the state. What should I do?
There should be no state requirements for this thing. This is a federal program. So I'm not sure what you're talking about.
Has there been any talk of expanding the 3.5 times for the NAICS code similar to 72? In the party rental industry, and the pandemic has been devastating.
Yeah, I wish for my party event rental friends it had been expanded there. I'm sure there was a lot of lobbying to make it happen, but I have no crystal ball as to what might happen in Washington. I certainly haven't heard that.
Regarding how much you can get when calculating the 2.5 times average monthly payroll cost of either calendar year 2019 or calendar year 2020, can you choose the greater of the two?
The rule says it's the lesser of the two.
Are you able to choose when you begin your 8 or 25 or 24-week period anytime after your loan is funded?
It starts when the money is dispersed.
Is there still a cap to every employee in calculating the PPP monthly average payroll?
Yes, $100,000 annualized, same rules apply.
Are contributions considered gross receipts?
That's probably a question for a nonprofit. It's an interesting question. I'm going to assume they are, but let's push that question in the community and get specific answers to that.
How do you record in the accounting books for the PPP forgiveness?
Talk to your CPA about that.
If you did not receive the EIDL grant but got an EIDL loan, can you now go get the grant?
Again, the EIDL whole program there's been no guidance about it yet, so it's subject to a lot more guidance. We believe that will be available, but most likely only in underserved communities. So we're waiting for more guidance on that.
Can you explain? You said you can't use EIDL and PPP for the same kind of expenses. What does that mean?
You can't double down. So if you're using PPP money to cover your payroll in February, you can't use EIDL to cover your payroll in February too. You could use PPP for payroll in February and EIDL for payroll in March, but you can't use it twice for the same thing.
Do you have a resource that helps us determine if the SBA loan or the PPP is a better way to go for us?
Sure, you're happy to, connect through the Google chat, and maybe Hannah, we could put back in the chat our Google form just for anyone to get it, and we'll be happy to try help you if we can.
We received an EIDL loan. Is it assumable if we sell our business?
I don't think so.
Yes, you will be receiving the slides after the meeting in an email, the slides and the recording. We have a PPP loan and have not yet applied for forgiveness. New rules apply for forgiveness applications.
Yes, especially if your PPP loan was for under $150,000, it's much simpler now. Or there are additional expenses that you can add to your calculation, which we outlined in the presentation.
Mm. Can your bank require you that your previous PPP be forgiven before the PPP 2?
I don't think so, but if your bank doesn't want to take your second PPP application yet, and you want the money faster, certainly you're right to go to a different lender. You do not have to apply twice at the same bank. The bank can do what they want, but you don't have to. You're not obligated to stay to that bank for your second PPP. It'll be easier for you in the long run, likely if you get them through the same bank, but it's not a requirement.
Do we know specific docs that we should get prepared for the second round of PPP?
I mean, you're going to have the same payroll backup as you did last. And then if your application is for $150,000 or more, you need to figure out if you're on a cash or accrual accounting system and prepare the documentation to back up your revenue loss. If it's under $150,000, you don't have to worry about that now, but you'll have to worry about it later.
Will the EIDL grant still be tied to the number of employees like last time, 1K per employee, or can you apply for the full 10K?
It shouldn't be now. You should be able to get the full 10. And if you didn't get the full 10 last time, you should be able to get it now. But again, it's not clear to us, to me at least, 100%, if that will be open to everybody or only to specific underserved communities. And I think it's the latter.
How does EIDL coexist with PPP and SBA loans?
They're all separate entities. We know plenty of people who have SBA, PPP, and EIDL.
The EIDL loan, not grant, was received last April. Repayment begins April 2021. Will we need to be paying it back even though we are not through the pandemic issues yet?
Unless they change the rules, you'll have to start paying it back then, correct?
My company was open before February 2020, but my first payroll check date wasn't until after February 16th. I have 2020 Q1. Will I be eligible?
The answer is yes. Somewhere in the slides, which you can get, there was a specific clause for explaining how you calculate your eligibility. I just don't remember it off the top of my head.
How does this affect my second round of PPP if we've spent 80K on EIDL on payables and equipment leases after PPP was expended?
Shouldn't affect it at all.
Are there defined rules of how to count employees? When and how should it be measured? Is it 12 months average at a point of time in measurement?
It's 2020 compared to calendar year 2020 compared to calendar year 2019.
In the original PPP, businesses that were acquired were eligible for PPP. What about this round? If the business being acquired got the first round of PPP, can I still apply for a new company?
Sorry, Hannah, ask that question one more time.
In the original PPP, businesses that were acquired were eligible for PPP. What about this round? If the business being acquired got a first round of PPP, can I apply for the new company?
You should be able to, but it's a question of the acquisition is an asset or a stock sale. If it's an asset sale and you're technically starting a new company, you're likely not eligible. If it's a stock sale, it should be no issue.
In the last PPP, it seemed that we could pay employees for staying home, doing miscellaneous jobs, etc. Do they have more specific guidelines this time?
That's up to you. You can still pay your employees for staying home if that makes sense for your business.
Our 25% reduction in income was in the first quarter and was not caused by COVID issue. Does this matter?
It doesn't matter for that requirement of the 25% reduction, but you do remember that you still have to make the attestation, certify that you require the funds to support the ongoing operations of your business, and you have to feel comfortable that you can make that statement.
With 2 partners and no employees, we got 2K EIDL advance last summer. Are we eligible for the additional 8?
You should be, but it's not clear to me yet if there will be only certain cohorts that will be eligible for the full EIDL, or it will be only available to specific groups. And when there's more guidance out about that, we'll be happy to share it with the community.
So for second draw does not require proof of documentation for amounts of 150K or less at application, but it does require documentation of proof of forgiveness for the second round of PPP. Is that correct?
If your application is for under $150,000 for second round of PPP, you will not have to prove that at application, the revenue reduction, but you will have to prove that at the forgiveness time.
Is there a definite FTE full-time employee calculation formula like there was for PPP 1 for PPP 2?
I don't think so.
You can submit for a PPP without a tax return, but you must have your tax return ready to go when you apply for forgiveness. Is that correct?
Not necessarily. So we're still waiting for clearer guidance about how you prove your revenue reduction, but I don't think that a completed tax return will be the only way to do that.
If I started to pay payroll in October of 2020, can I apply for the second round of PPP?
That all depends on when your business was opened.
For PPP,
If your business, I'm sorry, if your business is open after February 15th, 2020, you should be eligible for a second round of PPP.
for PPP2 qualifications, we use accrual, but we need to take into account the internal reserves we created over the year to account for deductions we expect to receive in specific quarters.
You're going to have to run that by your accountant. I'm sorry, I can't help you with that.
If a company did not receive the full amount 2.5 times in the first round, but did receive some funds, can they apply again for the first round, or do they need to just apply for the second round?
You know, there are some technicalities around that I'm just not 100% on top of, so I don't know how to answer it. I apologize.
Are all retirement and payroll costs included in calculating the 2.5 time loan amount?
Whatever the specific rules were first time, however you did it first time, apply here, with the exception that certain healthcare costs are now added.
Can you apply for the second PPP if you only spent 80% of the first?
You can if you plan or have a plan or can make it attestation that you will spend the additional 20% before you receive the second round funds.
To confirm, the only NAICS code eligible for 3 times is 72.
Yeah, it's 3.5 times, but it is only NAICS code 72 right now.
We are a meeting planning company, illegal for us to have meetings. Do we fall under the safe harbor one in any area we should be addressing?
I'm sorry, I don't know how to answer that question.
The original PPP was about keeping employees employed. Has there been any change to the forgiveness based on the numbers of employees that you were able to keep?
Not that I'm aware of.
The original application for PPP1 asked for monthly payroll and the number of employees. I used 2019 for these calculations, but the lender is pushing back since my FTE numbers were much lower during the covered period. Was it right to use 2019?
I don't know if you're talking about first round or second round, so I'm not sure how to answer that question.
We have a couple questions about SBA, but we will be having another Aminar on Wednesday.
That's okay, Hannah. We can take them. It's okay.
Okay, can you refinance an SBA loan with a new SBA loan?
In very rare circumstances, you can. It's very difficult to do that.
What is the deadline to apply for PPP forgiveness if funds were received April 2020?
I'm not 100% sure.
If my company opened in early 2020, how can I demonstrate that I had 25% less revenue compared to the same quarter in 2019?
Again, it has to open before February 15th, 2020. And then somewhere there in the slides, which we'll share with you, is a calculation for specifically if you open between January 1 and February 15th, what you compare it to or how you base it. I just don't remember it off the top of my head.
Explain what you mean by supplier cost. We are unable to pay a supplier due to the 80% loss in the business because we are an event vendor.
So that should be likely eligible as long as that supplier cost is invoiced.
What happens if you have added new locations in 2020 without these new locations, you would have met the 2020 or 25% decrease in gross receipts. However, with the new locations, you don't, but existing stores drop 25%. Are there any provisions to deal with this?
I don't think they are, and you fall into one of those sort of specific kind of catches. However, some of it depends if you are reporting them under different entities or under one entity.
Are there any restrictions of obtaining a PPP when some employees have been placed on a shared work program within an unemployment setting?
I'm not sure about that. I'm sorry. Hannah, if we could, or Kate, if we could please just go ahead and put the Google form into the chat one more time, because unfortunately, I have another commitment at 1 o'clock Eastern, so we're going to have to wrap this up in a couple minutes.
Is forgiveness calculated as the lower or higher? I have a bunch of that as 2.5 times. I thought it was higher, but you mentioned lower.
Forgiveness or the amount you can get?
This says forgiveness. I assume it's the amount you can get is 2.5 times.
The 2.5 formula has nothing to do with forgiveness. That's the amount that you're eligible for. It's 2.5 for most industries, 2.5 months, and 3.5 months for NAICS code 72.
What if you did not include owner compensation up to 100K per owner in the original PPP estimate for forgiveness? Can you then include that in applying for the next round of PPP?
So I believe you can, and there's also, I believe, a process to go into an amended PPP application for the first round, but I'm not 100% up to speed on that yet. I apologize.
Where can we start the second PPP loan application?
Again, you could start it whenever your bank or lender that you're going to get it through is ready. And if you had a reasonably good experience with your lender the first time, I'd encourage you to go to that same lender again.
Revenues have dipped more than 25% in 2 quarters, but if we see annual revs, the dip is not 25%. In this scenario, am I still eligible?
You're still eligible on the technical side, but then you still have to make a decision if you're comfortable with the attestation that you require the money to support the ongoing operations of your business.
Do we need to rush to apply for PPP funds as we did in the first round, or do you believe there is enough for all applicants?
I don't have a crystal ball. I don't think this will go as quickly as last time, but you never know.
Are EIDL grant funds included in the calculation of gross receipts?
I don't believe so.
Do you have to complete the forgiveness application for the first PPP before being eligible for the second PPP?
No, you have to, though, make an attestation that you've used all the money for allowable purposes, or you will use them before the time of your application, of getting the second round of funds.
Gross receipts is defined as gross income before any cost of goods or other expenses, correct? Because I've seen some definitions which differ.
That is my understanding.
Where will PPP forgiveness be booked on a P&L or balance sheet then?
Check with your CPA about that.
My company goes through annual audits and not quarterly audits. Should I use an annual gross receipt dip method to check my eligibility, or should I go for comparing the quarters?
I think if you are actually audited annually, it should be very easy for your controller or to run quarterly numbers for you and to determine it.
Are grants included in gross receipts?
I don't believe so. Just to wrap up, folks, just a reminder, we're going to take about 3 more questions, and then we're going to go ahead and wrap up. Just a reminder that you will be getting a recording of this presentation with the Q&A, as well as a copy of the slides on our realtime.inc.com and our Facebook groups. We regularly post information and updates as new information becomes available. And when there is a substantial new update to give that we think is worthy of another webinar, we will be putting that together. If you want regular information about specifically the SBA programs and how you could benefit from those, there will be weekly webinars on those at Wednesday at noon, and the first one will be this week, noon Eastern time, and you can register through the links on the site.
If I used all of my first round PPP loan funds on payroll covering a 14-week period, can I use 14 weeks as my covered period for the first round forgivable application?
First round forgivable application, you can't pick your weeks. You have to either do it at 8 weeks or 24 weeks, but if you used all the money up, it shouldn't be an issue.
Will you need to apply for forgiveness twice if you get both PPP loans?
Yes.
Do we have to take 3.5 times payroll, or can we take less to keep it under the 150K?
I'm not sure. I would assume you have to take the full amount, but that's an interesting question.
Accrual accounting system, how do we show 25% reduction in documentation? What documentation would be required to submit for a 150K loan?
It will probably be reports from your internal accounting system. Folks, we're going to take one more question, and then unfortunately, we're going to have to wrap it up for the day. So.
For payroll, this is a PPP question. W-2 counts for sure, but does a 1099 also count? In other words, is payment for a consultant to help with sales and operation also eligible in the second PPP?
Run that by me one more time. I apologize, Hannah.
It's asking about 1099s.
1099s are not eligible expenses for PPP.
All right.
Ladies and gentlemen, I thank you kindly for your time and effort. I know these are difficult times for everybody. Feel free to fill out the Google Forms. We'll put them in there one last time for you if you have any additional information you want or help you want. And we wish you all Godspeed. Thank you so much, everybody, and take care.